Okay, hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown Podcast. I'm Joe Oberly, senior writer at VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com, and that's Mark Craig. He's the Vikings writer, NFL insider, and Hall of Fame selector for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. He's a big wheel. He's a big deal. That's why he's on the show. Mark, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right, except for back spasms. Can't golf for beans, but that's not why we're here to talk about that, is it? But so I got the excuse in there right away before I.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. Anyway, we're here to talk about the Vikings. Last week they had joint practices with the Baltimore Ravens and to warm up to their preseason game on Saturday. And we'll start with that. Mark, reports coming out of TCO were that the Vikings offense kind of struggled day one, but got better on day two, and the defense played well throughout. Is that accurate? What did you see out from the team out at the joint practices?
Yeah, I mean, a big trend in some of these, or a lot of these, joint practices. Defenses are looking a little better than the offenses. I watched the defense both days. The defense looked well, especially the second day. The offense, I think the first day kind of came alive toward the end, but I would say the defenses both won, kind of won the day.
That's where we got any look at our new starting quarterback on this team, Kyler Murray. How did you think he looked against a different defense? I mean, he probably got more time than he did in that one series against the Giants in the first preseason game, and he didn't play in the second one. So what did you see from Kyler?
Again, it's watching Kyler in practice. You don't of any player I think I've ever watched. I mean, watching Kyler practice might be the most useless thing there is because so much of his game comes alive when it's live. And his accuracy, his poise, it's not. This isn't saying a whole lot, but it's clearly better than JJ McCarthy's. So there's a when he gets in a game, and things are, and he's moving around, what's his decision making process going to be? Obviously he's spent a lifetime being short, so he's got to figure out, but he's in a new offense. So how do you move him around? How do you get him to where he can see the middle of the field? Because I think some of his, like, when you ding him on like decisions, it could be, over the years you look at it and say, well, he probably didn't see, something and was taking a chance. How does that work with Kevin O'Connell's offense? But yeah, he's, and again, it was better the second day than the first day. But I think we're ready to see him. Let's just see him. Clearly there was no, there wasn't. If there was a competition, it was. It surprised no one how it ended up. This is how it should be. This is why he's here. He wasn't brought here to be a backup. He was brought here to extend plays, help Justin Jefferson be the best receiver in the league, and and have Kevin O'Connell trust that the plays that he can call, the guy can throw it in the same zip code.
Yeah, my biggest concern is batted down passes. There's nothing more frustrating than watching a game and seeing passes batted down by the line. But what can you do? The guy's 5'10", I think.
Well, I tell you what, JJ McCarthy. I mean, I don't know how many games started with JJ McCarthy getting a ball batted down or two balls batted down. So it's not necessarily not that this guy's Drew Brees, but Drew Brees is a short quarterback. They find ways, and I don't know that. I think fumbles is a deal for him in his career, Kyler Murray's career. But how do they work it together? Because the guy's been short forever. He knows how to play short. They didn't wake up yesterday and said, "Oh my God, I'm shorter than the average, shorter than everybody." So
yeah, and Drew Brees just went into the Hall of Fame, and he's preceded by another short quarterback, Fran Tarkenton. So it can be done. Can be done, right?
Yeah, this guy will be, probably haven't had a runner like this guy since Fran Tarkenton.
Right.
But the accuracy and his he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. But the accuracy, for me, the accuracy is what Kevin O'Connell can't wait to get his hands on. That he can make, as we saw, we'll talk about the preseason game, but the simple plays, are the ones that need to be made so that you keep control of the game.
You mentioned Kevin O'Connell's offense. That's one question I wanted to ask you. Kyler comes in with a different style. He likes to operate from the shotgun because he is shorter, and Kevin O'Connell wants to get a running game going, so he's going to want him under center. Kyler likes to get it out quick. Kale likes to go downfield. It seems a contrast of styles here, and I'm just curious. Can they come together and make this work with those contrasting styles?
We'll find out September 13th, I think. No, but you see across the league, Jalen Hurts is going to go under center more. I think, there's it's not like an evolution or going backwards or whatever, but there's the running game is still a very important part of this game, and we're seeing it a little bit more appreciated, as things go up and down and cycle around. So being under center, doing play action, given the illusion of, are you going to run? Are you going to pass? That it's basic basic football stuff that you're seeing more. I think more quarterbacks are going to be under center. And that's not to say he's going to be under center 100% of the time, but I think, you'll see him under center. To me, it's also Kevin O'Connell,
right?
Having to adjust because he's the guy that's, he was coach of the year because of how he handled a quarterback. And now, if you listen to the chatter, it's, well, if he's so good, what's wrong with JJ McCarthy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, black and white. There's nuances to everything, but he will have to, make some adjustments. And like, I think even last year, whenever he would let JJ play a little bit more, it's like we let the reins go a little bit. I think you saw a better version of JJ sometimes, but he can still work with JJ, but Kyler's a different guy, and he's got to acknowledge that, and he's got to use it. I don't know that you want to run him a ton, but get him out and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid because you enhance your quarterback room. Don't live in fear of the injury, but don't put him in too much harm's way.
Yeah, probably a fine line to walk, especially for this franchise who's had plenty of injured quarterbacks in recent years. Well, you made the natural segue to JJ McCarthy. He was your starter in the preseason game, and I don't want to dump on JJ, but I felt like he picked up right where he left off last year, just firing red hot rocket balls at his receivers, making it tough to catch, overthrowing them on other times, not showing the touch he needed. It wasn't great. It wasn't. It certainly validated the decision they made at quarterback, but for JJ's case, I was disappointed to see that it wasn't a little bit better performance out of him.
Yeah, it's a broken record with JJ, and we've, everyone's talked about it until they're sick of it. But he shows a lot of the same deficiencies. It's that first play, Miles Price is open. That's a 10, 12-yard gain. It's a first down. You get comfortable. You kind of move on. You can run the ball in the next play, and then that sets up the pass on second down. And he blows it by just firing it over his head. That can't happen. But then he makes, he has a nice sidestep. The pass rush, he steps up. He lets go of a ball, 50 yards downfield. Yeah. Nice throw, nice catch. Then they get to 4th and 1, and he, just panics and overthrows the guy. For the life of me, I don't know what, it's going to take to calm him down, to just, to bring it down a notch. Someone monitor his caffeine or something, or can you give Valium? Is that you're allowed to do that before games?
I'm not sure.
might be a substance problem with the NFL, but
Might
do
be.
something to, just calm the hell down,
And I
And I
read
don't-
somewhere that he was diagnosed ADHD. Now I don't know if that contributes to it, but then he should be medicating for that, which is probably legal. I don't know. I don't know what his problems are, but it's there was complaints of that last year where he didn't show the command in the huddle because he was so ramped up, and the game has not slowed down for him. And is that just a matter of more reps and more reps and more reps till your brain has some muscle memory?
Well, they can't afford to do more reps, at least not with first team live in season,
Right.
unless someone gets hurt. In my opinion, unless two people get hurt. But yeah, to me, it's whatever it is. He was an accurate quarterback. He was the irony of all this is, his senior year at Michigan when they win the national championship, his completion percentage was the best in the country. Now, granted, he was in a pro style offense, didn't throw the ball as much, but he threw it enough for that to be a pretty significant stat. He's just, and even whenever they already made a decision on the starter, he couldn't settle himself down enough. And then, for whatever reason, O'Connell mentions that he would have stayed in longer, but he got dinged up. And that's like that's the other thing about JJ is, okay, if that, taking O'Connell by, that he wanted to protect him or he got dinged up, and, what's the real truth behind all of that? What did it, was there something that like, JJ said, oh, this doesn't feel right. To me, that's as alarming as his inability to calm down at quarterback of all positions is this, hey, JJ's dinged up. Hey, JJ's hurt. Hey, this is that, I don't believe you throw him away. I don't believe you trade him for a can of balls, but it's trending in the wrong direction. And they have control of him for 2 more years. You work with him, because I don't believe anything you get from another team is going to be worth more than having him in case Kyler gets hurt and Wentz gets hurt, and everyone gets hurt like they always do. So that's the book on him is just it's stayed the same, and no progress.
Just for the record, I did not verify that anywhere on medical records that he has ADHD. I just read it somewhere, so I don't want to.
Yeah, he's talked about it.
That's okay.
The one thing I'd say about JJ, his answers, while they were entertaining in the beginning, now are, I got to put, he talks about, when something happens to him, he puts that in his, whatever the modern term for Rolodex is, where, puts it into his, so I can draw on that later. Well, when are you going to get enough in the bank to start drawing on some of this?
Yeah.
Well, that's what be my thing is, we've heard that, it was sort of like when Nick Mullins would throw 4 interceptions and he'd come out and say, I got to do better. I got to I got to learn from this. And it's like, okay, well, when are you going to learn from it?
Yeah. It's a tough position in sports. And, I think the Vikings did a disservice to themselves and him last year when they anointed him the starter before he had really earned it. And now he's got to scramble back, and it's looking like it could be even steeper climb for him. I mean, if watching the game, and in my mind, and this is not, I'm not breaking news here, but Carson Wentz had a much better, more poised game, looked in command of the offense certainly compared to JJ, and I'd say he's looking more like the backup quarterback, and JJ potentially getting dropped to the 3rd string, which will make his climb steeper. But maybe that's where he needs to be, and that's how he's got to do it. But talk about Carson Wentz game and this growing discussion online that he's going to be the backup and JJ is going to be the 3rd.
Well, the discussion online is because people watch the game. I think during our live blog I wrote, do we really need Kevin O'Connell to come out and crown one or the other? I mean, we all know what's going to happen if Kyler goes down for an extended period of time.
Yeah,
Carson Wentz is going to come in and start. I mean, that's, to me, Carson Wentz is at a point in his career where he's playing with house money. He's calmer. He's played. He's experienced, and we forget that his talent was a first round talent. And he's not 50 years old. He's still young enough, and he's just settled into a point in his career where you trust him to function. Whereas the other guy, it's like when two dogs run out the front door on you, and the one's young, and you're never going to catch him. The other one's probably going to turn around and walk back in. It's just there's just the level of like excitability and this craziness that's going on at a position where you can't have it is for JJ, and then the other guy is more flatline. So
Carson had a second year. It's this first full season in the full season, but in the Vikings offense, and we've heard for how long how complicated it is. So that's got to even bode well to what we're seeing out there from Carson. He looks calm in this offense now, and that's that's the guy, someone with that can step right in and maybe save a game when somebody's been hurt. And I think with JJ, you'd be wondering if he can. I think with Carson, that he has the ability to go in there and really be an effective backup and then maybe starter for a while.
Yeah, long term, for 100% Carson Wentz. If you're trying to work with JJ and you maybe need to get extra reps in practice or whatever, you maybe I feel like maybe you give them, even though I know you're game planning in season and all this stuff, but my feeling is that Carson Wentz could probably stand behind the huddle and absorb a game plan. Don't just relegate JJ to throwing balls after practice to the fifth stringers. Keep him involved. Keep working with him, and I'd keep all four of them if I was. I would keep. I think you can get Max Brosmer on the practice squad, but I'm keeping the three of them on the 53. I just, their strength at quarterback right now is the fact that they got three of them, and they, I think you have to assume you expect the worst, or hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and that's what they're looking at here. Is I just don't see any three of them staying healthy for an entire season, let alone I could see Kyler being really effective, but then hey, Kyler is hurt and he's out for 3 weeks, or certainly JJ if he comes in. He'd be hurt, or Wentz. Wentz is
Wentz with his style of play. He kind of doesn't hold back.
Right. Suddenly, you think you got a good thing going, and a guy like Wentz takes up and challenges a linebacker, and it's like, well, why'd you do that? So things happen in the NFL. These guys, you're not necessarily always thinking long term when they take off running. And Wentz certainly wasn't when he took off running against the Browns and got clobbered by the rookie linebacker.
Yeah.
So I keep all three of them, and because you're probably going to need all three of them.
And for the record, for those people, I got the question yesterday, but they're not going to trade JJ right now because of what you've just described, and certainly because his value is so low. I mean, you would be scrambling to get a 6th rounder for him with what has been publicized about his struggles thus far.
I would listen to all offers, but 6th rounder I wouldn't do him for a 6th rounder.
No. I think it'd be tough to, even a 5th. I don't even know if they'd get that. But so I for the reasons and the injuries they've gone through, you've got to hang on to all three of them and see what you got this season. Now is to see what Kyler does this year. If he has a great year and wants to renegotiate and you can afford him, then maybe you start really thinking about shopping or putting JJ out there and letting people see what he's got. But if Kyler struggles and you got to get the other guys in there and he sours on this relationship and he's ready to move on, well, then you better hope you got a couple guys to bring up behind him.
Right, and Kyler adds another layer to the, he's here because he failed. Well, terrible franchise, obviously, but he's here in part because he didn't live up to a big contract, And one of the beauties of having him is that it's not a risk. You've invested $1 million in him, and the league minimum to get him to play for you for 17 games plus the playoffs, they hope. Do you feel the same way about him, even if he plays well, giving him, $45-50 million a year, which, he's not going to be given any discounts. If he shows his first round number one overall talent, and he's not going to be saying, oh yeah, I'll take, 25 million, he's going to want to be back up toward the top.
He hasn't been here long enough to do a hometown discount. Is that what you're saying?
No. might cost you a little bit more. I don't know.
Right.
But that's just so, hey, by week 10 we could be sitting here talking about, hey, JJ's, he was player of the week in the NFC, and just this league is so, what we said last week can be completely, gone, and it's what we're going to say next week could be completely different, and so you just keep preparing as if you're going to use all three of them.
That sounds like job security for podcasters, so that's good.
Well, it's, I just listen to this stuff sometimes, and it's like, yeah, Kyler's the guy. Let's get rid of the other guy. Well, Kyler played 5 games last year and got hurt, and now whether he could have, I'm sure he could have come back later in the year, and they were looking like, yeah, we're going to be getting rid of him anyways. Let's just keep him on the bench. But he did get hurt, and I think he's played a full season maybe once or twice. So maybe first 2 years. So yeah, I just think you have to assume you're going to need all of them.
Yeah.
But no matter what people see from year to year, they're just like, well, it's over, and we don't need this guy. We got this other guy. And
it's the nature of the position. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. I mean, I think he's been like in the league 8 years or something. He's been injured and out for half of them, And finally, the Iron Man from Kansas City, Pat Mahomes, he was injured last year and is struggling to get back. It's the nature of the position. That guy's going to get hurt sooner or later. It doesn't matter who you are, Some guys, have a career where they don't. Tom Brady didn't get hurt that much. I think he had 1 year where he hurt his knee or something and missed game times, but he had a.
Yeah, Brady was hurt in the opener the year after they went undefeated. He was hurt in the opener and missed the entire year.
Right.
That's when Castle came in, and they won 11 games after winning 16 the year before, and they missed the playoffs in 11 games.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we're both on the same page there, So I think this is a good time to take a break. The quarterback situation, it's a podcast segment eater. Gotta love it. Every week you gotta talk about the quarterback situation. But we'll come back and we'll talk about more what we saw in the game on Saturday and what we're looking forward to as we head towards the third and final preseason game and not too far away from the regular season. So come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark, you mentioned in the first segment about that big long pass from JJ, 50-yarder to Ty Felton. It was a great adjustment on the ball by Felton. It was a nice play by J.J. McCarthy to buy some time and make the pass. Ty Felton, the first preseason game, I think he had a drop, which hurt his chances after having a pretty decent camp. Then he makes this big catch. Where do you see him? Is he, he's going to make the team for a number of reasons, I believe, but is he working himself into some time, some reps as a wide receiver on this squad?
Yeah, I think, they typically keep 5 receivers. He's probably your 5th receiver. 4th, 5th receiver doesn't really, Miles Price is probably your 4th, and then Felton's your 5th, or vice versa, depending on what you want to, what plays you want to run. There are 2 different types of players. So, yeah, I think Felton is, they have a pretty solid 1 through 5, I would say, starting with they got the best receiver in the league. He doesn't always have the best numbers, but it's no fault of his own. Addison could be one of the best number 2s. Jennings was a great when they got him, a great pickup for a 3. Miles Price has really elevated his game. He's, people talking about him being unguardable out there. And, when they get into games, I don't know.
You got Miles saying that.
Yeah. I don't know that when they get into games, he's going to be, unguardable, but
Right.
but he's got a skill at receiver that they're starting to notice. So,
and they lost a receiver this week. Jashawn Jones was suspended for 3 games for the substance abuse policy. They didn't name what it was, but he had spent the previous 2 seasons, I think, on the practice squad and was probably headed back there. But is this? It's certainly bad news for him and the squad. He made some plays in these first 2 games, but this is not going to help him with sticking on this roster, is it?
Well, no, yeah. Someone says he's a leading receiver in the preseason. That might be an indication that you're not, one of the going to make the roster. If you're leading something in the preseason, that probably means that you're a practice squad guy. I think it was a DUI that he got, or they had it, back in April or something like that. I would say he was a bubble guy at best. He was probably he's your 6th, 7th guy, a guy that I think spent the last year on the practice squad. So, he'll end up back on the practice squad.
Okay. Moving on to running back. The top 2 guys, Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, did not play. Damon Claiborne, the rookie speedster, got the start once again and plenty of time, but he's been starting these past 2 games ahead of Xavier Scott. Claiborne had rushed 8 times for 18 yards, where Scott had a little bit better game, 7 carries for 28. Each had 1 catch. Seems like a battle there for RB3. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I don't think it's a battle. Claiborne's your 3. Scott will probably get a lot of carries on Friday night, because unfortunately you give all those punishing carries to someone who is trying to build a resume for. He did a great job last year stepping up and being that 3rd guy, but they went out and got Claiborne, who has some gifts from God that Scott doesn't have, the ability to run faster than anybody else on the field. So he's your 3rd guy, and Scott could be a practice squad guy, could end up going somewhere else because he does have really good receiving skills. I don't know, you could even see another running back or whatever other running backs they have, getting a lot of carries, because I think Claiborne, might even be a guy that they protect on Friday as well, because what more do they need to see out of him?
Yeah. One guy that I tried to put on their team a couple weeks ago on this podcast, but he's no longer with them, is Ty Chandler. And I saw this week he hurt his knee in the Saints-Rams game. He might be out for a while, so he might not be on any team.
There you go.
He's like
you were rambling on, and I'm thinking, hey, he's gone, Joe.
Yes, hopefully it was edited out of the podcast, and here I brought it back. He's like Jonathan Gennard. You leave the Vikings, you're going to spend some time on the injured list. No, I'm just kidding. That's just a coincidence. Anyway, how about the defensive side of the ball? In the game, I saw some better play from Caleb Banks and the Big Citrus, and Dominic Orange actually dropped into coverage, which everybody was talking about. To see this, near 300-pounder is dropping to cover receivers. So, what did you see on the defensive line on Saturday?
Well, and also in the joint practices and the one-on-ones, watching Caleb, spend a lot of time specifically watching him. Caleb he's bigger than everybody. He's not in football shape. In fact, I asked him, "Are you out of shape?" And then, within his 7'1" range, I asked that question. He didn't clobber me. He kind of agreed. He said, I haven't played in so long, and because you can tell when you watch him, especially the hot day. There was a hot day with the joint practices, and his gas was like he couldn't play more than two snaps without just looking totally gassed. And that's okay, because heading into camp, we didn't think we'd see him. We thought he'd be a pup guy. So
Mhm.
it's while he's not in shape, the ceiling on this guy is astronomical.
What'd you learn, Mark? You did a story that dropped yesterday at the Tribune on Caleb Banks. What?
Yeah, I learned that he's bigger than everybody. I know. I learned that he's out of shape, inconsistent and out of shape. But the ceiling is, everything they said about him. If his foot holds up and he has the heart for the game, now that has to be determined when he starts playing. You
Mhm.
know, if you have the heart and you have the feet, he's going to be pretty much everything that they sold him as being. Because I think you just don't see speed, quickness in that size of person inside, and so he's going to be a load. If he gets in shape and he stays healthy, I feel like he'll be a guy that you could see three people blocking him inside sometimes. But and the guy next, the orange, we all love his nickname and everything, but he's the more advanced guy, and he's
Mhm.
probably he doesn't look it, but he's in better shape football wise than Caleb is right now, and I see him making a lot of plays, and he's going to be I was telling. Thought about telling Rob Brzezinski, if he's done such a good job. We're talking about these rookies so much. He should
Yeah.
do a hold in next week, or next year, because he's, you know, um, but
Don't
yeah,
give me any ideas, Mark. Please.
but I liked Dominique Orange, and there was a play on the goal line. They were coming out after JJ missed that fourth down, where Caleb did a great job shedding a guy and making a stop, and he will wreak a lot of. He will be unblockable for some guys in the league if he gets up to where he should be, from a conditioning standpoint and from he'll add strength and everything.
Yeah.
Him and I was talking to him about this. I said, I envision like him in 2 years or a year even he'll look totally different, and I can see why they did it. It still would have scared the hell out of me to pick him where
Mhm.
they did, but hats off to those guys. If everything they believed he could do, he does.
Big citrus dropping into coverage. Is that something you had to do when you played on the defensive line? Just bang.
Yeah, big citrus. I spent 18 years trying to gain weight, and the rest of my life trying to get the weight off. So I was not a big citrus. Uh, yeah, it's funny because that's you know we're not really seeing a real vanilla preseason, or if we are, I want to see what the Packers are in store for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those where there's a lot of things that can happen when there's a Flores defense,
Right.
including what we saw.
Another one of those rookies that you were referring to that had a good game. Charles Demings is making it's making tough to keep him off the field. You think we're going to see him figuring into the secondary this year?
Yeah, and I think that's why you saw McGlothern. McGlothern, I think, was hurt, but instead of being put on injured reserve, I think it was waived injured
Mhm.
because some of the guys like Demings, just moved past him. Yeah, Demings will be a guy. He'll contribute this year for sure. I mean, they need more corners, and I think they found a good one in him for sure.
Yeah, I don't even know what uh, Nudie, as they called McGlothern. I think he made a big play, but he was later injured in the game. I'm not even sure what it was. Do we know what his injury was?
They haven't said, but um, he really, I mean, 2 years when he made the team as undrafted rookie, he turned a lot of heads, and I'm not. I don't know that he went backwards. I just think maybe some of the talent around him, some of the younger talent, just
Mm.
stepped ahead of him. But that's not to say, I don't know the extent of an injury, or you know, I think typically he'd be on injured reserve if they had a future plan for him. But he's got a spot in the league somewhere. Someone will take will give him another shot.
Right. Um, let's see. Top three tacklers in the game are all named Jacob Thomas, Jacob Roberts, and Jake Golday. Thomas's game, he was the leader with 6 tackles and 4 solo, and the UFDA Thomas is making a name for himself. And Jacoby Thomas came back, and finally this week, I think he's he's back after an injury. So he's the guy they drafted. What do you see shaking out between them?
Well, I think Jacoby Thomas is will be starting, if not early, then at some point. I think he can be a standout player. Jake Golday, to me, him being kind of all over the formation, the inside, outside. I think he's a significant enough player that I don't give him a whole lot of time on Friday night. I think he's ready. I think you're seeing what you can get out of him. Now someone's got to play. But there are a lot of bodies that can play. They'll have to treat some of these guys will have to play a lot of time because, and that's good for them. It's good for the Vikings because they can rest more players, and just. But they can take a look at these guys if they need them down the road, or some other team, needs them. But there's going to be a lot of guys in there that are playing a lot of snaps that we're never going to see again.
And just because I looked it up before we got on, speaking of all the Jacobs, there's also 5 guys on this team with the initials JJ. Just wanted to get that out there. I don't know.
Yeah, and Ford, it's just how we used to call Jefferson.
Yeah,
maybe Jefferson will get that JJ back one day.
It might even be more. Maybe I counted wrong. There's a heck of a lot of.
We just assumed that we couldn't call Jefferson JJ anymore, but maybe that'll change.
Some other good things that come out. I mean, not a big deal, but Will Reichert's money. He hit his only field goal from 52 yards, and the Vikings did only score 3 points in this game. And you got the battle going on at punter, Hecker and Thorson. So I think, and I'm sure you probably agree, Johnny Hecker makes a team, but do they keep Thorson on the practice squad? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I can see him being on the practice squad. And I'm thinking of doing a story on Reichert, like trying to find out the origin, the first time that they knew that this guy was flatline. Like, was he at his first birthday and they gave him a present and he just, whatever. And then funny scene at camp. So he's coming, it was when it might have been the last day the fans were there. So they line up all these kids, for them to sign their autographs. Each kid has a little ball that the players can sign. So, and Reichert is, the best kicker in the league. They're only first team maybe this DePaulo was, but a first team all pro kicker. At 25 or whatever, he's going down the line and he stands in front of this little girl about 5 or 6 years old, adorable little girl. He looks down and she's holding her ball and she goes, "Do you want me here? You want me to sign your ball?" And the girl looks up and goes, "No." so and I'm standing behind the girl and I look up and he gives me the guy hardly ever smiles, but he's just kind of did a little grin and I said, tough crowd.
That's tough when you're new face in the league and still haven't made your name.
He looks like he's 10 years old and he's like a mascot or something, but here's the best kicker in the league. And some girl said, "No, get out of here."
It's interesting, but Kansas City's kicker kicked a 69-yarder this past weekend. And as we've talked about before, 50-yarders are just becoming the norm. I mean, Reichert's got a 54 and a 52 already in this preseason. The Vikings finally get a kicker that they can trust. And we've struggled with that ever since Ryan Longwell left here. And but now it's like, it's almost an expectation that you have to just be money on 50-yarders plus. I mean, because they're kicking 60s. And what's the record? Is it 67 yards? Is that the record in the NFL?
What is it up to? It's 60. Was there a 68?
It could have been. I should have looked it up beforehand.
I mean, it's like 70's coming. I mean, 70 is coming. It's
right. And the 69er doesn't count because it was in preseason. But good God, I mean, I started reading a little bit about it, and there's kickers that are explaining that the rules of the changes they made and the maybe the ball that these guys are doing this. But isn't this kind of bizarre that these guys are making all these 50-yarders? It's supposed 50 is
I think it's a story I've written every year for like the last 3 years. It's, and getting a hold of Gary Zahner, former Vikings special teams guy that runs camps now, and it ranges from everything. The snappers are more elite than ever, to the holders, to the ball, to this their training. It's the training for the kickers. If 12 men in the huddle back in '09 had happened, the coach, if they had the length of a Reichard, would have went, whatever, we'll still kick it.
Right.
So,
but the kickoff change rule is changing things too, and it just they were talking about in the story I was reading, and that teams, it doesn't take you long, if you're starting your series on the 35 to get to the 50, and then you can start thinking about field goals. But are they going to start doing that and then still risking, if you miss it, then the other team takes over at the 50? I don't know. It's kind of changing the game with the length that these guys can kick them, and the rules that are on the kickoff.
Well, yeah, there was a game early last year where the Cowboys were basically taking a knee, and they weren't. I don't think they were even to half. They were about like at the 50, and for a game tying, I think it was close to 60 yards. It might have been a 60-yard, 60, 58, something like that, where Bailey just swatted it through, no problem. It's like, well, good Lord, you're basically positioning the ball. Well, part of another part of it is what there used to be mud in the NFL. Remember when you saw mud? Remember when you saw dirty jerseys and dirty pants? Remember when you saw wind? You don't see a lot of wind anymore. Eventually, I think Cleveland will be indoors. They'll put the Bears indoors probably. Maybe it'll be like there'll be one stadium left. It'll be Lambeau, and it'll be like this. Like, oh my goodness, this is the game where we play outdoors.
Yeah, it's heading. It's heading towards arena football, no question. But it's just funny. Coaches are going to have they're going to have new decisions to make. I mean, just wasn't very long ago, Kevin O'Connell was always going for it on fourth down because he didn't trust his kicker. Now maybe he can game plan a different way with right.
Well, I think all coaches go for fourth down just because their numbers or whatever tell them that they can do it. And I think Campbell in Detroit, when he's a crazy man when it comes to that. But I think he might have done it a little too much last year. But I love how more aggressive the coaches are in the league now.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we can kick this segment aside. Get that? Kick this segment aside. No.
There you go.
We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with more stuff on Vikings Territory Breakdown. All right, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark had another story that dropped today in the Trib on Keith Carter, the offensive lines coach. Sounds like a real interesting guy. Had quite the journey to this point in the NFL, having gone through. He had a motorcycle accident way back when he was a player that kind of ended it, and he ended up being a coach, and he's been moved around a little bit, but pretty interesting story. What'd you learn about doing that story, Mark?
Whenever I approached him, I had never met him before, so obviously all the negative press. Taylor Lewin from the Titans, several players that he coached before. Started with Taylor Lewin. Whenever he was on with the podcast Bussing with the Boys, and which probably gets a little more viewership than us. Whenever it was announced that in Tennessee that Keith had been fired, he's basically called him a dictator. No one liked him, all this stuff. And then later, when Mike Vrabel was fired, I think he tweeted again something about I always liked Mike. I liked his staff except for Keith Carter. And then guys, Carter's at the Jets by that time. The Jets players are chiming in with laughing emojis and that speaking the truth, all this stuff. So he comes here. The Jets changed staffs in 24. He comes here as a assistant offensive line coach in 25. So comes here with all this bad press, but he's kind of in the background as O'Connell is sort of evaluating him. As you know, Chris Cooper's contract's going to be up after that 25 season, and you know, just my expectation was to get a defensive guy that didn't want to talk about it, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. Transparency. He gives me the, you know, he says that you know, when the Jets, we're gonna fire him in 23. Robert Saleh came to him and said, "Hey, we're going to send you this leadership, you know, to kind of change his the message that he has, the approach that he has. He's still an intense guy, but you know, the delivery of his approach, he changed. It's been a year with this Corn Ferry. This program was developed by a guy, basically a sports psychologist in Minneapolis, who worked with Jim Marshall and a couple other Vikings in the 70s, and really took it to heart and became a different person, but didn't lose that edge. And I think that, you know, the communication, which O'Connell talked about, the growth of this guy, being able to relate to players, but still push them in a way that Chris Cooper, you know, players had gotten comfortable with Chris Cooper. You know, this wide zone that it's not new like a lot of analysts say, but they're going to be running it more because O'Connell can trust the way that it's, you know, the design, which comes from a lot from Frank Smith, who's now their assistant head coach, new first year, and the teaching of Keith Carter. And I think you see it at first play against the Giants. They run the wide zone. They have Aaron Jones, I think, in the game specifically to see how it's going to look when they block it with their starters and they run it with their number one back, and he gets 18 yards. And if you look in just by, I guess, ironically or whatever, Chris Cooper is now with the Eagles. Their first play was the same play, wide zone run. And if you watch people they can Google it, they can, you know, NFL Plus it, whatever. You see those two plays and compare them. And, you know, the offensive linemen in Philadelphia kind of stop running. They're not hustling like you saw Darisaw, like you saw Donovan Jackson, and also the fullback, you know, hustling, just making that play look and feel and sound the way it should. Philadelphia, you know, they're not doing that. And one of the linemen does a reach. It's a holding penalty. First play of the game, holding penalty. You're first and 20. Does that sound familiar? You know, so I think they're, you know, who knows where this is going to end up. But I do see a difference. You see a difference in tempo, the way they practice. You know, I spent a couple months on this story talking to everybody. You know, Tom Cable, when I told him about the difference in tempo, he's like, and Tom Cable's a guy who was at UCLA when Keith Carter had been hurt, had that motorcycle accident, had to quit playing as a tight end who was heading for the NFL, becomes a coach. And Tom Cable said, we had a saying, there's no meetings on the grass, you know, and that would be to describe this guy to a T. You know, he is very much not a dictator, but he's a motivator. He pushes guys. And I think Brian O'Neill might have said it best when he was like, you know, basically if they hadn't been underperforming, like if they were leading the league in rushing and they decided to have this guy lead them, they might feel differently. But he said, we need this.
Yeah.
And a big part of this guy's, he needed 100% buy-in from Christian Darisaw. And he found a way, you know, they went out to dinner. They spent 3 hours talking about, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is what, you know, my intention. And a lot of that comes from this, you know, it might sound like a bunch of BS, but he learned a lot in this program that he went through and how to communicate it. And he got Christian Darisaw on board, you know, and I'm talking to Christian. I'm like, you don't have to say anything, you know, make anything up. You know, tell me the truth. And you know, he's on board. And it's an old school guy. His grandfather is Gino Marchetti, the Colts Hall of Famer. You couldn't get any more old school genes than this guy. And he's a fascinating character in that, how he's changed, how, I get into the accident and, he's being loaded into the ambulance and he's saying, oh my God, my coaches are going to kill me.
Right.
He's their scout team player of the year when he's a freshman. So his mentality was just work my ass as hard as you can. And never, I had coaches that would, some of the coaches, Gary Bernardi was there and said, Keith didn't look at you sideways when you coached him hard, but he had to learn. Not everybody's Keith Carter, and so it's a fascinating tale. The offensive line will play differently. I'm not, making any predictions or anything, but you already see a different in practice. I think the running game will improve, and I think that's going to make a huge difference in just everything, from Kyler Murray to what he's able to do, what O'Connell's able to call. The defense maybe becomes fresher. I think he is a key linchpin to this season. And O'Connell said it's the biggest. He kind of thanked me. He goes, I'm glad someone's doing a story on Keith. We're all, because when I talked to O'Connell, it was all, the quarterback the competition was still going on and all this stuff. And he's like, it's the biggest story that nobody's talking about because of the quarterbacks. And so I think coaching will make a huge difference with this offensive line. I really do.
You quoted Darason and Brian O'Neill. Were there anybody grumbling about this, about his style?
Not that. I mean, sure, there could be some people that one thing Tom Cale is, when you're successful, you're going to take bullets, and Keith Carter has taken bullets over the years from players. Yeah. I feel those are the two guys. I mean, it's sort of like Bud Grant used to tell me. He goes, I would have been nothing if I didn't have Mick Tingelhoff and Jim Marshall. Because when Bud first got there, it was, the players would call it Mickey Mouse. It was like Mickey Mouse, like some of the drills that Bud would do. Mm-hmm. The older players would say, Mickey Mouse. They would sing the Mickey Mouse song, and it was Jim Marshall and Mick Tingelhoff who grabbed hold of that team and said, obviously Mick Tingelhoff had a great relationship long term with Bud. Jim Marshall, both as well did, and so getting O'Neill and Darasaw, if those guys buy in, everyone's going to buy
in. Just real quickly, can you explain to me the wide zone scheme? I mean, is it a matter of just guards pulling players pulling and moving the whole offensive line out to the sideline and running over there? Is that what that means? What is
it's like a synchronized, like if you ever watch synchronized swimming or something where it's
my wife was a synchronized swimmer in high school.
There you go. Maybe she could, play center or something. It's everyone moving in unison at a speed where it's consistent. It's the back going that way and knowing when to cut back. The coordination between like the center and the back and how it moves. O'Connell put it to me this way. He said, he goes, Mark, everyone knows how to type, but not everybody knows how to write a great story. He said, Keith knows what it looks like, but he said, even as importantly, Keith knows what it sounds like. Like you can close your eyes and you can almost tell, the movement. And I think that first play against the Giants, you saw that. It was just, the speed with which they all moved and, just the coordination, that's not easy to achieve if you're going through practice, just kind of lollygagging and joking and all this stuff.
Right.
And one thing that Carter told me is that when he was talking about all this stuff, and trying to impress upon me that, I'm not going to stop making these guys uncomfortable, because that's when you get better, is when you're uncomfortable.
Right.
He said, that he's going to make them uncomfortable. And, that's just part of like coaching.
It should be really interesting to watch the offensive line this season, especially knowing that, and that Carter's behind it. So I know I'll have a new perspective even this week when I watch him.
I'd say, another thing that you didn't get into in the story because it was not a X's and O's type story was, his teaching the ability to anticipate these 4-man rushes. The Vikings, by the nature of all of the weapons that they have, get a lot of exotic 4-man rushes. And I would just told O'Connell, I said, you guys you just look confused all the time when you talk about these 4-man rushes. I said, are you confused? And he said it doesn't feel like they're confused, but the minutia that goes into teaching how to handle these pass rushes, and when you're working in, like say there's a stunt and you're working on it, it's so detailed that if you don't have that, it goes out the window. So I think you might see them a little better at handling stunts and stuff like that. But for me, especially the tackles, they got two of the one of the best tackle tandems you could have. Darrisaw's healthy. Donovan Jackson is a rising player. He's going to be a really good left guard. Fries needs to step it up. He's got durability, but now he needs to play the way they paid him. The center, we'll see. Can they have to get by with him. He's a big body that can. He's smart, so I think they can win with him. So there's talent there, and the coaching is going to make a big difference, I think.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, now we have a new segment killer is the offensive line with Mark here doing stuff. But anyway, they signed Kenny Dyson, veteran defender. They signed Matt Lauder and Jonathan Harris, letting go Tyreek Chappelle and Taki Taimani. Any thoughts on there? Taki was seems like a favorite around on the team and or maybe with fans, but he's gone. So what are your thoughts on any of those acquisitions?
Yeah, I mean, Dyson is another UFL guy, that
had a sack in the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So, he's a UFL guy. I believe he was a 6th-round pick of the Giants, I think, a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. These are camp bodies. These are guys, you're taking looks at, and as you go into this last preseason game, you just you need a lot of people to get through because you're gonna be resting a lot of people.
Anything you're looking for in that game as they play? They go to Denver on Friday and take on the Broncos.
Well, I think the number one thing is if JJ starts and he's like, who do you protect of JJ and Wentz? So to me, I don't know if O'Connell's going to has given it up yet, or if he's going to give it up. That tells you a lot, because I think
they can do a roster management day with Wentz and say, he's a veteran, he's old, we gotta set him down.
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting because I think Max Brosmer probably plays. I think he played the whole second half. He'll play at least that. Does Max Brosmer start and play the whole game? I don't know. It's so that's number one. Is like, how do they handle? So I think you want to rest your. To me, I would have Wentz be my backup, and I would rest him, and I'd let JJ start the game.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask. We'll talk about the 53 next week when we know more about what it is. We'll talk about that game. But just real quickly, last week I included some questions from Indianapolis Colts fan Trenton Freitag, and I got a couple more. I was just do one on the way out, just to ask, test you, and so that he can place a bet before the season goes. If that's what he's doing, I don't know that he is. Justin Jefferson is going to get plus or minus 1399 yards, 1,399.
We did that one last week.
Did we?
I said under, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right.
His yards and his touchdowns we did last week.
Then I won't include those. How about this one? Since you're the All-Pro guy that votes on All-Pro, the number of All-Pro players on this team is 1.5 over and under, and the Pro Bowlers is 3.5 over and under.
Oh,
Can you
Pro Bowl,
go for half a player, Mark? I don't understand that.
well, Pro Bowlers, I'll go over on Pro Bowlers because I think everyone is a Pro Bowler by the end of the when they get done calculating everything. All pro 1.5 or
Yes, 1.5. Yep, all pro.
yeah, like long snapper's kind of a perennial guy. Kicker, I don't know if can the kicker do it 2 years in a row. He's jinx proof. I have thrown stats at this guy that would have brought down any other kicker in history, but he just keeps making them.
Oh, good. And we're so happy here.
I guess I would go over because I could see 2 guys becoming all pro.
I would think so. Maybe Jefferson. Maybe with the QB, he's back up there.
Justin needs other, like most receivers. He's not like most receivers personality wise, but like most receivers production wise, he can't do it himself.
Okay, Trenton and anybody else, there's those suggestions from Mark on what to vote. We'll have some more of those maybe next week as we finish up the preseason and head to that big tilt with the Packers. That real quickly, are you like me? I do not like having the Packers the first game. I mean, I was talking about this with a guy this week. It's like, he's a Packer fan. He says, no. I mean, we should ramp up to this game. Maybe the 5th week of the season, you start playing your divisional games. I know they've been holding some to the last weeks in the season in the past, but this one is especially difficult because, the Packers have a quarterback who's been there for several years, and we got a whole new quarterback situation. So I think it favors them in that regard. It's a home game for the Vikings, but then on the other hand, maybe you don't know what's coming. But I just think to sell the NFL, you don't need to waste that. Save that bullet for about week 5 when people are already going on to do something else before the snow flies and have that big tilt then.
Well, would you rather have them play with Micah Parsons or without Micah Parsons?
That's a good point.
I think week 1 at home with Micah Parsons guaranteed to not be playing is I would be dancing in the streets if I was a Vikings fan because, you're at home and you can get a jump on them. You're healthy. I know they're healthy too. Well, they're missing Parsons. You're healthy. There's an element of surprise to what's Kyler Murray going to do. I think on the opposite. I like the fact that the Packers won't have any film on Kyler Murray. Or not much film on Kyler Murray, the offensive line. Just and then Parsons and primarily Parsons not playing. I think it heavily favors the Vikings.
All right. Well, then we can just write down Mark's prediction for that game. He's picking the Vikings in that opener. So anyway, all right. Well, let's leave it on that note. We'll be back next week to do it again. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mike Woldham. Thanks, Joe Johnson. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We sure appreciate it. So until then, until next week, we'll be back. Have a good one and skol.